College Success. We are in week 4 of our semester. This runs from September 21st to the 27th. And after this week, you will be halfway done with our 8-week session. So hopefully that is uplifting and positive news to recognize. So this week you are in chapter 3. You'll see you have a little collection of assignments there. So I'm going to get into our material folder. And you'll see that there are slides there for this chapter. I'm going to start going over the content of the chapter. So chapter 3 is about building academic skills. It's going to go over the article, the research article in there, and I'm going to go ahead and get to the meat of the chapter about how memory works. And this is the model of memory that our chapter uses, that we take in information from our environment using our senses. So we see, hear, taste, smell, feel, whatever it is. And from there, it goes to our working memory, where we are aware of that information being processed. But unless we actively work on remembering, practicing, it's not going to go anywhere. So we have to work on it, hence the working memory. Sometimes we also, in different models, we'll call it the short-term memory. We transfer it to that long-term memory, and we can actually remember something forever. Information in a normal kind of condition does not just disappear. It's the fact that we sometimes don't know how to retrieve the information, and that's why we forget. We don't know how to retrieve. We don't know how it was stored to begin with, whether it was because we were so young or because we didn't work on the information. So we have to be able to know how to retrieve information when we're trying to remember it and apply it. So encoding, our textbook talks about, is how we take in information. And sometimes our past experiences will determine what's important. So we may see some information, but we're able to filter out what is helpful and what is not, and therefore able to work and remember. And then using multisensory is the best approach. So evoking as many senses as possible. So if you can see something and hear it, that's going to be more beneficial to you than just one of the senses. So there are different strategies to get working memory, short-term memories, into our long-term memory. So if you think about, if you have to file things at your job or even just in your personal life, if you have to file paperwork, it's usually easier if you have a system. So you know how your information is stored. Same thing with our memory. We need to, work with what we see, hear, taste, and so on, or else we're going to forget it. And so there are different kind of strategies we'll talk about here. So the first one is chunking. So looking at this, at first glance, you probably are like, that doesn't make much sense. And then you could probably start to see the pattern there. But once you chunk it, it becomes a lot easier to distinguish the parts. And so that's one of the strategies for storing information, is to chunk it, to kind of segment it and put it in so it's not quite so overwhelming. The next strategy is elaboration, and elaboration just means to go into more detail. So if you are trying to remember definitions, for instance, you define it, but then you go into more detail. You give examples, you attach a story to it. Anytime you can attach personal, meaningful information to something you're learning, it's going to be better for your overall retention of that information. So you want to elaborate, you want to go more in depth with it. And then we have mnemonics. So I don't know if, hopefully, that looks familiar. That looks familiar. This is your math, PEMDAS. This is your Great Lakes, Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, Superior. In music, they use it to remember the notes in between the staff. So there's lots of different acronyms. Those are a type of mnemonics. So little devices that can help you remember information as well. I know when I was studying for my comprehensive exams, which is one that you have to go through before you get your doctorate, I would often make up little rhymes or make up little sayings, things that would help me connect information together. Okay, so once we have encoded the information, we have seen it, read it, heard it, we practice some strategies to store the information, well, then we have to retrieve it. So how you retrieve it really is based upon how well you organized it to begin with. So if you organized it really nicely, if you chunked the information, if you used mnemonics, if you elaborated, it's going to be more easily accessible to you. So we'll talk about some ways to retrieve information here as we go through the rest of the slideshow. So active reading strategies, and these all kind of go together. So I don't know if you've ever been reading something and then 10 pages later, you're either asleep or you have no idea what you've been reading since page 2. It's because too often we are passive in our reading. We just kind of glaze through the pages just to say we did it, but we don't necessarily remember what we've read because we're not active. So we need to take a more active approach to our reading, and these are some tips on how to do that. The first thing is to establish some prior knowledge. So if you're reading about something that you already know a little bit about, you'll probably notice that learning new information is easier because you have a baseline knowledge. Now, if you know nothing about the topic, it might be beneficial for you to kind of do a quick Google search, skim the pages, try to establish some prior knowledge. Therefore, it makes it easier for your mind to kind of make those connections as you go. So ways to increase prior knowledge if you have none. Again, search for a video, look online for an article, look at the table of contents, look at the chapter summaries, just kind of breeze through the chapter or the article and just get a nice preview so you can start laying that foundation. There are some strategies that you can employ, and these two go together, and honestly, I will use the SQ3R because it builds upon the 3R anyway. So this is what I like to tell my reading students. These are things that you should be doing all the time because reading is a process. When we write, for some reason we just know, oh, the first time I write, it's not going to be perfect. I know I'm going to have to edit and revise and let someone else look at it. But for reading, sometimes people don't quite understand that that's a process as well. You can't expect to 100% understand something the very first time you read it. So you want to approach it like a process. You want to survey the chapter, preview it. How long is it? What kind of words are sticking out? Bold, graphics, diagrams. Get an idea that's helping you set that prior knowledge. Question. So look to see if there are questions the chapter, the teacher, or yourself have posed, so that way you can be actively looking for the answers to those questions. Read a section at a time. Don't try to read everything at once. Read a couple pages. When you're done reading that section, go back and see if you can answer the questions. Go back and take notes. Go back and highlight. Recite, maybe close the article, close the book, and try to do a summary. If you can't summarize it, it probably means you didn't understand it or retain it, so you should reread. And then review, check for accuracy. So how well did you understand this information? Can you answer all the questions? Did you leave a gap in your notes? Another tip a lot of people use are highlighting. I'll also kind of group in underlining. So you want to be effective with your highlighting though. I don't know if anyone listening is guilty of this, if you've ever highlighted and then you look, you're like, oh my gosh, I've highlighted the entire page. Well, that's ineffective. So some highlighting tips. It says highlight during the 3rd R in the 3R reading approach, meaning wait until you are reviewing. Read, do not highlight, take notes, or underline while you're reading. When you're done with a section, then go back and highlight, underline, or take notes because you have a little bit of perspective. Sometimes while we read, we think everything's important. And so we highlight and take notes on everything. But if you read a whole section first and then go back and be like, all right, what was actually the most important part of this section? Then you're more likely to get, just certain highlighting done. And you only want to highlight about 1 or 2 sentences per paragraph. And sometimes the rule of thumb is about 25% of your grade. So those are some highlighting tips. Some note-taking tips. Again, this is chapters about building academic skills. So note-taking tips. That starts before class. It's not just something that happens in class. Preparing for class, if you know that on Thursday you're going to be in chapter 3, you should read chapter 3 before class on Thursday. So you're setting that prior knowledge. You also don't feel like when you are in class and the teacher is talking about chapter 3, you have to write every single little thing down because you're already familiar with the chapter. Make sure you know what's coming up, what assignments are happening, and then also be engaged in class. Pay attention to where you sit. Pay attention to the eye contact you're making, the body language. All of those are actually helpful in the note-taking and learning process as well. Our textbook goes in to say, if we don't write down or we don't practice what we hear or learn, we're going to forget it, which I think we all know this. If you're not actively trying to remember information and working on getting it into storage in a way that's going to be easy to retrieve, you're going to forget it. Another thing is look at your note, the way you take notes. Now, some people are audio learners, and so they don't have to take as many notes. They may only jot things down once in a while, and that's fine. Some others need a lot of notes. So look to see what works for you. There's a lot of note-taking apps out there. I am more of a pencil paper type note taker, but some people really respond to the apps or typing their notes even. Here's the least effective type of note-taking according to our textbook is linear notes, where it's just basically like you're writing just paragraphs because there's no structure, it doesn't stand out in any way. So more effective would be maybe using an outline or the Cornell method where you kind of put a column on the left, a bigger column on the right, and then a summary area. Over here you have a question, a heading, a term. Over here you answer the question or go into more depth, and then you summarize. That helps you kind of almost set up like a study guide, so your information is set up in a way that can help you prepare for a quiz or just review. And then this is also for people, I think, if you're more visual in your learning, the concept mapping or matrix. That's for if you really need to see like that information in that visual format. Okay. Some other note-taking tips. Now, a lot of these do pertain to if you're sitting in a classroom. So if the instructor is spending a lot of time on the topic, their voice goes a little bit higher pitched, or they speak a little bit more quickly or with more passion, those are all ways to know, like, okay, this is important. Obviously, if they put something on the board or they pay a lot of attention to a slide, that's also something you want to look at. All right, and here are some study strategies. So this kind of goes back to that retrieval part of our memory. We want to be able to retrieve the information. Well, multi-senses, that again goes back to encoding information. Try to use as many senses as possible. There's this concept called picture superiority effect. It says our memory for images is stronger than our memory for words. So we're actually going to remember pictures and images more so than just words, which is why they say try to combine as many senses as you can. You want to test your knowledge. This goes back to that retrieval. So once you've stored your information, practice getting it out of there. Practice quizzes, flashcards, study groups. Test yourself. Practice test. It's a really important and powerful way to learn. And you'll read and you'll see in your text a little research article on this. So this is what I just mentioned. To try to do this, maybe at the end of every class, just real quickly before you leave, okay, what were the main points? What should I walk away knowing? Use flashcards, set up a practice test, quiz your friends. So those are all ways to help with that last process after you've stored your information. This is retrieving the information, and practice testing is a great way to do that. Another way to really see if you understand something is to teach other people. If you can teach someone else something, you know you've got it. If you struggle to convey your message, you probably need to go back and brush up. So teaching is a really powerful tool to help you with studying. And then study groups, I know some people aren't a big fan of these, so it just depends. So if you are in a situation where you need to study with others, or you do feel like you benefit from other perspectives, you want to choose your groups wisely, that you all have the same goal, and you all have some ground rules, and then maybe assign some roles for everyone to fill so everyone has like a purpose. Organize, this goes back to, again, that storage piece of your memory. Putting information into your own words. Oftentimes, learning only has meaning when it has meaning to you. Meaning, you can learn facts and information all day, but if you don't put it in your own words or make that personal connection, then it's just gonna, you're gonna forget it by that evening. So you want to make those personal connections. And then the last couple of slides talks about, making sure how you study or how much you study, which one makes the difference, and then coming up with an effective study plan. Okay. So that's the gist of chapter 3. So hopefully you can use that PowerPoint and then your actual textbook, chapter 3, to get that information out and maybe spend more time on a certain area you feel would be more beneficial. All right, so let's go through, and we're going to focus on these right here first, because this I'm actually going to do a separate video for. So you are going to get your final project steps 1 and 2 today. I'm going to go over them and upload those in a separate video so this video isn't quite as long. All right, so you are turning all of these assignments in by Sunday the 27th. Of course, you have a discussion this week, so make sure that you post your original discussion post by Wednesday and then respond to 2 classmates by Sunday. I am still having so many of you not respond to classmates. You'll do your original response and then you don't go back in. I will say it's improved from week 1 and 2. I am seeing an improvement, but we want to make sure that you post your original response, and then to get the other half of the points for your discussion, you want to respond to 2 classmates. All right, so let's go into our assignments and let's walk through what you're doing this week. So your chapter 3 discussion, remember 250 words. I'm not, like if you're at 249, I'm not dinging you, but if you are significantly below, I do take off some points, or if you're not on prompt. If you're not answering the prompt, I take off points. So you are going to write a brief summary of what you recall from last week's class. So that means you are summarizing week 3, chapter 2. A real quick summary, and I can leave my video up and going, so if you need to go back and refresh your memory, you can. But you're going to write a brief summary. So like a paragraph or so, summarizing what that particular lecture was about. And then you're going to ask at least 2 questions that will require classmates to dig into the chapter or other readings. Again, this all refers back to last week. Week 3, chapter 2. You are recalling what was from chapter 2, week 3, and then ask 2 questions that will require classmates to dig into the chapter. So that's your discussion. Original post by Wednesday, respond to 2 classmates by Sunday. Okay, your next assignment, these 2 go together. Okay, so first you're going to take this. It's going to open up. It's going to be like a little test your memory activity. You're going to go through and try to see how many words you can remember. Now, based on that, you're going to answer these 3 questions. So you'll click in here, and you can just click right in here, write submission. How many words did you remember? Which words did you forget? What technique did you use? So you'll complete the assignment right here, and then you'll answer those 3 questions based on that. Okay, your next assignment is your chapter 3 quiz. So much like your chapter 1 and 2, make sure that you are addressing all parts of the questions. You'll see are pretty straightforward. Describe these processes. What is the testing effect? Why is multisensory learning important? But then there's also a couple that it sets you up with a little scenario, and you need to respond. So just as a reminder, 2 to 5 sentences each. Make sure you're responding in complete sentences, and you have your PowerPoint, you have your textbook, you have my video. You can utilize all those, which is why I am kind of a stickler with that 2 to 5 sentences, since my online classes have essentially a week to work on the quiz, as well as the resources right there for you to access. So then when you complete it, you make sure you save it and upload it. All right, the last thing you are doing for this particular week is your college resource reflection, your student life and rec. Okay, so I wanted to touch base on this because the last couple ones I'm still having students just summarizing these resources. I don't need you to summarize them. I am super familiar with all of these resources, so please do not just summarize what each office does. It's what you personally could benefit from that particular resource, how you could use it, what would be helpful to you. So this is for student life and recreation, so you're going to click on that link. It's going to ask you like, hey, you're leaving. I actually have it open up here too. And this is going to have a list of all our student organizations, and we have quite a bit. We have a lot of student organizations. So I'm going to encourage you to kind of look through that list and see what sticks out. So maybe you want to be in the theater. You're going to click on that. It's going to give you a little description. It'll tell you who the advisor is, where they're located. Some of them you'll see are connected to actual majors and career fields. Some of them are just for fun or connecting with other people. So I'm going to encourage you to kind of click around. You'll see this one's inactive, so a couple of them on there might not be currently meeting, and of course with COVID, some of them might only be meeting virtually. You could always, if something actually really does interest you, you could go ahead and contact the advisor, but you don't have to go that far for this assignment. Just click around, get to know the student organizations. I'll also encourage you to go to current students and click on, we do have a game room here. So you could look a little bit about the game room, and there's some activities there. Again, they're probably modified for COVID right now, but we do have a game room here. So I kind of like students to know all about that. That student club link is right above there as well if you needed to get back into there. All right, so When you are clicking around, again, you're looking to see which organization or organizations kind of look interesting. And for the actual reflection, it says find 1 to 3 you might be interested in potentially joining. You don't actually have to join. It's just something that catches your attention. And talk about why. Like, why would you want to join this? Why would it be beneficial? How can it help you by getting more involved on campus? Remember, these are a paragraph long. Okay, so you're not writing tons on here, but it's your reflection. It's not just a summary. All right, so for week 4, test your memory survey, then respond to those 3 questions. Discussion, dusting off the cobwebs. Remember, it's asking you to recall from last week's lecture. Chapter 3 quiz, and your college resource reflection on student life. Make sure you respond to your original post by Wednesday. Everything else due by Sunday. And then I will be uploading a separate video that starts introducing and walking you through steps 1 and 2 of your final project here shortly. All right, hope everyone has a great week 4.